Hello. Is it good morning? Good afternoon? Somewhere?
11:45.
Well, welcome. Sorry we didn't have the workout we had intended with Jeremy out there, but it's been fun. Kind of culmination. This was our last set of workouts, unless something else comes up between now and draft night. But really excited having the 10th pick. There's a lot of great players that we're interested in, and try to show continued progress with this team. Building this team is all about acquiring talent. You can acquire it through the draft, you can acquire it through free agency, you can acquire it through trade. And we're going to continue to do everything we can to get the best possible team. So with that, I'll just open it up for questions.
Tommy, last few off seasons, you guys have undergone significant roster change, and at the end of the season, both you and Wes remarked how maybe team chemistry continuity affects the defense. So where's kind of a line between those things as you enter another off season here?
Well, certainly you want to have consistency, but you look at the reasons that there were. I think it's very significant where we lost Bradley, at what point of the season where we lost him. That was a devastating injury. We pivoted, we made a big trade, and certainly it was going to take some time for those guys to gel and get in on the defensive end. But I think defense starts in the summer. It starts so much of the time that you put in together. And to your point, we've changed the roster a lot. And I think you have to do that when you're not successful. Right? We had a team that we made the playoffs 2 years ago. It's a heck of a run, 17-6. We knew that probably wasn't going to be replicable, and we went and did some big moves to acquire more talent. I think as you continue to go through this, you certainly want to settle on a team. This is our core and our go-forward team. We're not there yet, and defense is always going to struggle if you don't have the continuity, to your point. But also I think you got to have a little bit more of a defensive mindset, and that's something that Wes is doing a great job with the team this summer to do. But you also have to have really, top dog players out there, and I think we're continuing to add those pieces, but it comes over time. I don't think you just come out tomorrow, this is our roster, and hey, this is a defensive team. You put all 5 defensive players out there, you're not going to be very good. You have to have a good blend. I think we're continuing to do that, adding more pieces. I think Porzingis gives us a little bit more rim protection, gives a little bit more presence in the paint. Gafford came a long way in a short time. We're seeing progress with him. The rest of the team, it just kind of continues to go as you grow, and I think we're pretty excited about what we've seen so far from the player development standpoint with our players this summer. They've got a lot of players in D.C. now and been through D.C. since the end of the season trying to get better, and I think we have an excellent player development staff that's helping them in that regard. You got to continue to get more athletic, more length. I think that's where the NBA is. I still think you're always going to need somebody at the rim, but you need people that can go out and stop on the perimeter. Got to contain the dribble, stop people from gutting us and getting in the paint, spraying the ball. I think that's where we've really struggled, is getting guys off the three-point line. And a lot of that starts with dribble penetration. So being able to do those things in a better, sustained way, that's the goal for sure. I think one of our best defensive players is Bradley Beal. But we've asked Bradley to do a lot over the last few years. And it struggles to be a two-way player. You need a lot more. I think you need a little bit more assistance on both ends, and that's something we're trying to continue to add. And I think you also have to develop those players. We've seen some progress from Denny. We've seen some progress from Rui. Corey, we didn't anticipate Corey to play a lot last year, and all of a sudden he became a pretty significant player for us. So waiting on young players is, it's tough, but you got to be patient if you're going to continue to add that way through the draft. I think we've added pieces through the draft. We've added pieces through free agency. We've added pieces through trade. Now it all kind of has to start to come together.
Tommy, speaking of Brad, we spoke to him on Saturday. He said he had just kind of started to get back on court and do those types of things. Do you have an update on his timeline? Obviously, I know there's other stuff concerning him, but in terms of his rehab.
I think he's in a great place. The good news, and he'll always tell you first, the good news is it was his left hand, right? But I think getting all the flexion, the strength back, I've never seen a better healer than Bradley Beal. His body, he knows his body better than anybody. And just significant to see some of the things he's able to do just in the weight room, and that's where it all starts. He's in a good place. I fully anticipate him being ready well ahead of training camp, but where he's, there's people that are ready for training camp, and then there's people who have really, really high standards for themselves. And I think Bradley would tell you, he's got a very big chip on his shoulder for the upcoming season. Injuries tend to minimize people's value in the NBA. And that's unfortunate, but it's like You know, you think he couldn't play the way some people look and report about him, but I look at a guy 2 years ago, led the league in scoring, was all NBA. We were in the playoffs, but I get it. You know, that's what happens. You go down with an injury, you can't play. But I'm not worried about the noise outside. I just look at the player, and I know that's somebody you can build your franchise around. I know he's going to have a tremendous season coming up. Where he's at right now is not where he'll be in a month. And in 2 months, he'll be, you know, as we get ready to go to Japan, I think he'll be in full swing in terms of his shot. I think he's going to continue to work. You know, he's really good right now with his ball handling skills. He's going to get those tighter. I think right now he's really working on, first and foremost, he's working on the strength in the hand. But creatively, I think there's ways he sees the game where he could score even a little bit more efficiently. You know, getting back to some of the catch and shoot threes. For years, you know, that's what he was. He was a catch and shoot player. And by injury, because of what happened to John, Bradley had to increase his usage, being more of a ball handler. And we have no problems putting him at the point guard. But trying to get him shots, you know, it can get difficult at the end of clocks and people are throwing three bodies at him. So we have to do a better job offensively of making sure he gets cleaner looks. And some of that is strategic. Some of that is just being patient, getting the ball to the second side, third side, whatever we can to get him better looks, we got to do. But where he is right now, I think is, you know, most people would be happy to be where he's at. He's not. He wants to be better. He wants his shot ready to go. He definitely heard about it. Banneker, where that first shot went up, you know, nobody gave him a mulligan, unfortunately, but I know he's going to be right there. He's one of the best shooters in the league, as he always is, once he gets his feet underneath him.
With the 10th pick, you guys have drafted relatively well in that range 9 with Rui and Denny and stuff. Is there, obviously you'd like to have a star come out of that position anytime or that draft position, but is there more urgency to try and find someone with higher upside, or like how do you view the win now versus upside and kind of like what you think that the 10 overall pick?
Yeah, I don't know if I would agree with win now. I think you got to win more. I think, you know, to say our season's going to come down to who we drafted 10, well, you know, we probably wouldn't ever want to do that to that poor kid coming in the door, and that'd be short-sighted. Every draft has really good talent if you're patient enough with it. And to find those players, you know, the immediate gratification of getting somebody who can go out and make the all-rookie team and do those things, hey, that's great, but can they sustain it? Can they be in the league a long time? For us, there's not a position that we don't need depth in, but I don't think we're going to do anything but take the best player available at 10. I think that this time of week, as you head into draft week, it's a really good idea not to pay attention to any noise that's out there. You know, we can move up, we can move out, we can move down. It's all kinds of options that are there, but I look at it as, hey, we have the 10th pick in the draft. And so we're going to analyze it, what's best for the Wizards in our future. And I like the young players that we've added, but it's still at the end of the games, it's still going to be your top guys that have to bring that game home. You know, the depth, we're going to continue to add. You're right. Stars, where do stars come from? You like to say, well, usually you have to have one of the top 3 picks, but I know Giannis has something to tell you about that. Jokic, some of the last MVPs, international players, by the way, but they didn't come from even in the lottery. So sometimes you have to be patient. You know, I think in those players' cases, they would tell you that their teams were very patient with them. And so at the 10th pick, I think there's going to be a talent there that can help us for sure. Is it going to help right away? I don't know. But this time last year, I didn't think Kispert was going to help us, and he did.
And last year, the Rush trade kind of came together around the draft.
The day of the draft.
Yeah, okay, the day of. So I was going to
With
say,
free agency starting 2 days later.
Right.
So we're happy we have a week this time.
So just in terms of conversations, do they already start now? Do you anticipate like conversations happening closer to the draft? Like what's kind of I guess GMs talk all the time. Like what's kind of that process like?
No, you just said it. We talk all the time. And unfortunately, you know, I think part of this business is you have to have a bit of empathy for players as they see their names are getting knocked around and stuff. I'll continue to say you don't really hear anything about Washington. I do that specifically because I don't think it's fair for families to have to go through, and it causes a lot of stress. At the end of the day, you know who you can talk to in this league. You know who wants to get deals done and who wants to get their agenda out through the media. I think we always have been pretty good at getting deals done if people are willing. And, like my job is to do the best job for the Wizards, and that's to get the best talent. So if it's through the draft, if it's through a trade, through a free agency, we've looked at all those. I think we're going to continue to do that.
Tommy, how strenuously have you attempted to move up in the draft?
Strenuously?
With how much enthusiasm have you attempted to move up in the draft?
I think you talk to every team ahead of you for sure, but it's at what's the cost and what is it they're looking for. Sometimes you can have all the strenuously and enthusiastically you can possibly come at, but if you don't have what they want, you gotta, okay, what's next? We move on. But I think this draft has some really good options where we're at. I think you can move back and still get something similar, but moving up is always a indicator that hey, there's a talent that you don't feel is going to be there when you draft at 10. Well, what's the cost to give that up? Is it going to cost a starter, a young player, future pick? If those are the things we're willing to do whatever it takes, then you got to go all in. But you have to have a dance partner that's willing to do that too.
So, how much do you value the point guard position as a typical pure point guard as opposed to these hybrid kids that we see now that can ball handle and shoot? Has it changed for you, that kind of narrative of how you see that position in the last couple of years?
Well, most importantly is I think how the players view it. I do think if you watch the game, and I know you watch a ton of games, there's lead guards, there's secondary role, creators, and even third people bringing the ball up the floor, getting you into your offense. I don't think there's a pure point guard left. There's points guards, right? There's an S on the end of it now. And I think it's really kind of the Bradley Beals. I think Bradley's a special player because he's able to carry the ball, a little bit usage-wise at point, can be off the ball. But some of the most dangerous point guards in the league are more dangerous when they're off the ball, right? That's what makes Curry so amazing. It's when he doesn't have the ball, what he's able to do. But I think the position itself, there's going to be a lot more hands on it as we get into especially late in the clock. You'll have different people trying to create and get to the rim. We need more creators. We need more floor spacers out there, I believe, to take full advantage of what Bradley and KP can do. You look at what Kyle was able to do for us last year, and a lot of that was by necessity. We were running out of talent. We had a lot of injuries and stuff, and he had to move over a chair. I think, you look at Pope's history. Pope has always, most of his minutes in the league, been at the 2. Started a whole year at the 3 for us. Kyle was a little bit 50-50, the 4 and the 3. He was our starting 4. Well, and last year the combinations we weren't able to ever see with Porzingis, with Bradley. They never played together. Rui didn't really play until second half of the season when other people were leaving. So trying to get that whole picture. Who's the point guard? I don't think we have one under contract right now, certainly, but we have the confidence Bradley could do it. We have some other players that we think we can be secondary playmakers. That pure point guard, I don't go into the mentality that they have to fit a certain criteria. They just have to blend well with what we have, and I think that's going to be somebody that is a very good decision maker, who sees the floor very well, is capable of getting in the paint. I think we really need a lot more of that.
From that position, from Wes's standpoint, I think he wants somebody that obviously has a high IQ and can also guard his position.
It's another thing Wes and I have in common.
Is that the same value you see right now with that position moving forward?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think that's ever going to change, Chris, but I think you do need to consider the way that we all like to say positionless basketball, and I think sometimes that gets tired. It gets thrown out a little bit when you can't figure out what a player does the best, right? But for us, I think guarding your position is going to be critical. And if I told you that we're getting gashed an awful lot from the point position, that tells you we need somebody with a lot better defensive mindset that we can put out there. And we did a lot of trades last year at that position, and we ended up the season with Satoransky starting for us, and he wasn't on the roster until after deadline. So I understand consistency at that position is going to be important.
As you go through this process, workouts, interviews, you try to glean the intangibles of the players. What are the non-negotiables for you? Like, what are the boxes that a player has to check off to be a Washington Wizard?
And they got to compete. And they have to have a demonstrated ability to go out and compete. They have to know the game. You're willing to accept that a lot of these players are 18 years old, 19 years old. So you're not looking for the super high NBA basketball wisdom because they haven't acquired that yet. But you got to know how to play the right way. And I think we put these guys through quite a bit, certainly in our interview process. But your resume is why you're here, right? If you have a resume that says that you know how to navigate out on the floor, I just you go back to I like aggressive, assertive, relentless. Those kind of attitudes. Those are our non-negotiables we like to bring, and we have to up the level of that across our roster certainly. But those are the things you're really looking for. We like to think we can develop the player's talent once they're in the system and they kind of understand what it is that you're asking them to do. But the raw material, if you can find those things in players, I think you're going to find a really good player. One thing we're bumping up against now, kids, we were out at the playground this weekend. You guys, a lot of you people were here. We're at that. A lot of kids don't grow up playing on the playground. They don't grow up playing basketball. They're doing a lot of 1v1 and 2v2 and, not playing the game necessarily, not the traditional way. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you get them into a setting now where the NBA, you got to play a lot more basketball. The only way to do that is to play. So you'll see a lot of our player development stuff this summer. We're getting early fives in this summer, trying to get young guys to take all the drill work they've been doing, go out there and implement it on the floor. And, they're not necessarily high-level games, but being able to take those actions you've been working on and apply them, that's what this is all about. And that's what they used to do on the playground. If you couldn't play, you wouldn't play all day. You'd be sitting there waiting, get back on the floor. So you want to be king of the court. It was fun to get back on the playground this weekend. We were all talking about how much, that meant to the game and the transition of the game. Doesn't mean it's going to ever come back. I'm not saying that, but it was a good reminder that it takes a while for your skills to develop, but you develop by playing, not by drilling all day.
I mean, you've got multiple teams around you and behind you with multiple firsts. Do you anticipate a lot of movement on Thursday?
I do. It just seems like this is it's that kind of draft where some teams may say, you know what, let's just put what we have on the table. I also think a lot of teams recognize they're great things to have, first-round picks, all, not necessarily having 3 or 4 of them in one draft. So those allow you to get involved in other deals, certainly.
Tom, you said a couple months on the radio that you wouldn't necessarily think of drafting a point guard to be your day one starter here. I guess now that you've seen a lot of more prospects up close and personal, is that still how you feel, or has that thought process changed much?
Well, I don't think the thought process changed, but I'm just trying to be a little bit managing the expectations of a rookie coming in the door. I think out of fairness, I can say whatever. That player has to come in here. I don't want him feeling that pressure from day one. If we were to draft a point guard, certainly we think he's capable of playing backup minutes next year. And if he can start, I'm not going to tell him he can't. But I don't want that pressure coming in the door on that person. That changes the whole experience for him, walking through the door. When John was the number 1 pick, he knew from day one he was a starter. I don't see a John Wall in this draft. There's a lot of good young players. There's some good point guard prospects in there. But I don't think from day one there's going to be somebody that makes you stand up. But that's for them to prove us wrong on. That's what's fun about the draft. It's the players that come in and surprise you.
I guess on a related note, how do you weigh best player available versus fits and needs, and especially respective to where you guys are drafting 10th overall?
I think it's just the ability to forecast, project where that player could be in a couple of years, where the game's going. I don't think you want somebody that can't shoot. I don't think you want somebody that only has one skill that's going to be their superpower. I think those kinds of things that you identify and say, hey, what if we could grow that player in these directions? Obviously, you want two-way players, but to have an elite rebounder that can also defend, to have a couple of those things. We see these characteristics in you and we can develop them. I think that's what's going to be the big separator. There's not one thing that we say, okay, that's who we're going to draft at 10. Right now we have probably 5 people on the board. And there's teams that think similar. You kind of know who looks at the game similar to our club. There's some other franchises that value things that we value too. So you got to figure out if they're going to, roughly who's going to end up drafting who. That's ahead of you. You can almost predict certain teams and what they're going to do, and then there's wild card teams. I think of us as a wild card. People usually don't guess who we're going to draft. We do that. It's not intentional. We just try to see who has the best skill attributes, the things that we value, project them forward, and quite honestly, who could develop into what we think is going to be a solid rotation player for a long time. If they can become a star, great. But let's start with that. You know, we're not afraid to take swings, certainly, but I think the draft is especially this year. I think there's going to be some solid players. I think just by the fact that they're still guessing at who's number one pick tells you it's not settled yet.
Tommy, when you owe a future first, does that affect at all how you draft or how precious maybe you are picked this year, or do you have to kind of say that so
No.
far away, so much could change?
No, you always are cognizant of it, but we could fix that in a hurry if we needed to.
How much stock do you put into the guys that you bring in for actual workouts opposed to maybe guys that you're looking at that never come into the building?
Well, and there's guys that we work out that nobody ever knows about too, to your point. But I don't put a lot of stock in the workout itself. You could be an excellent shooter, come in here, miss every shot, and we know you're an excellent shooter. You can be maybe not so good, come in, have the workout of your life. That's not going to change it a lot either. It's more we're bringing them in for the interview. We're bringing them in for the process of breaking you down, making you accountable for decisions, film work, off the court things that we really want to look. And you can't get it over Zoom. You can't get it over the phone. You want to be eye to eye. And, you know, a lot of these players are being interviewed without even knowing it. You know, we take them through an entire day. Let's keep that in the room. But we have a lot of people interviewing them with them not knowing. From the time they leave the hotel to the time they get on the airplane to leave here, they've talked to a lot of people maybe without even knowing it. We download everywhere. I don't expect guys to be idiots in front of me, in front of our staff, but maybe they can betray themselves somewhere else, and we're going to find out about it. We just like to see your character. I think that's one of the biggest things that we hold here. Going back to your non-negotiables, I don't want to leave that out. I would hope that that's a given, but we're going to be up in your area in terms of your character.
I mean, how do you weigh a player's three-point percentage in college or in basketball and determine whether someone can build on that?
You know, that's funny. I was giving Jeremy a hard time about it. I said, I don't know which one hurts my eyes worse, the free throw percentage or the three-point percentage. And he laughed because he knows, hey, look, in college, a lot of times you just do what the coach asks you to do. A lot of times you're catching the ball. You're jacking up a bad three-point shot at the end of shot clocks and stuff. We look at a lot of the mechanics, certainly. If you look, go back and check out Bradley's stats when he was in college, right, his year at Florida, especially at the beginning of the year when he had two ball-dominant guards. Bradley got the ball with about 3 on the clock and had to let it fly. You wouldn't have thought he'd be a great three-point shooter if you looked at those things. We look at who's on the floor with you in college and what you were asked to do. I think you can improve. You know, I know a lot of people in this room didn't think Rui could ever shoot three-point shots. You know, and he'd like to have a word with you, as a matter of fact. But he proved he can do it if you work at it. And that's what player development is. I'm just teasing. Hey, he couldn't shoot his threes when he was in college. I told him that too. But if you put things in front of talented NBA players and you challenge them and you hold them accountable and they hold themselves accountable, much higher standard than we can. Like, what kind of player do you want to be and what do you think it's going to take to be successful? They're going to work on those things. And we've seen that improvement. So like a player, you didn't mention Jeremy, but I would say because he's here today, you look at his college three-point shooting, his college free throw percentage. Those were not what we would say very eye-catching in a good way. But we also seen players that put in the time and you have a good development program, you think those numbers will come up for sure.
I know you've consulted with Brad with some off-season moves in the past. How about the draft, given he has the experience as an AAU coach and
Yeah.
a lot of these guys?
You know, Bradley's been in more gyms than we can go into. You know, he's been with some of the top players, and some of his kids are now in the league. And he'll continue to put guys in the league. Certainly, he talked to all our guys that are around the youth programs. Some other team, you know, Isaiah Todd has one of the top teams in Richmond right now, or in Virginia, his AAU team. So guys are out there, players know players. So we talk to all our guys, but Bradley certainly has hands-on, ground-level views of a lot of these guys. And I put Beach Jam up against a lot of NCAA games like that. It's a high-pressure, high-tense situation, and see what guys are made of in those kinds of situations there. And he's been in those gyms. So I'd bounce stuff all off of all of our players. I like to see what they think about guys.
This is kind of Wes's first really being involved with the pre-draft stuff after last year was kind of chaotic. How has his perspective helped influence you guys?
Oh, it's excellent. We want everybody's input. We're very collaborative. And I think You know, with scouts, when they put forward a player's name, I say, okay, great, you're going to move here. You're going to live with him. You get to coach him. Hey, wait a minute. You know, you got to have a lot of empathy. That's the hardest job in the franchise, being the head coach. And everybody thinks, well, we can just get the talent. Now you make it work, coach. That's not how this works. You kind of have to come at it for everybody, understanding the pressures of that job, the day-to-day that comes with putting players out on the floor that you trust and what it's going to take, how long it's going to get there. Because I think scouting is, you know, it's only part of what we do. You have to take all that information, acquire those players, put them in a situation, and hopefully the team comes together. You know, and time again, the one factor that seems to we bump up against a lot is injuries, and injuries can set back a franchise. But what I'm trying to figure out how to build a team with enough depth that you can push through injuries and continue to thrive. You know, I think one thing none of us could have forecasted a couple of years ago was a world pandemic and what that can do to your season. So moving forward, hey, we want to have a team that's capable between the Wizards, two ways, go, that you can survive some of those games where, you know, where we filled the most players in the roster last year in the NBA because of a COVID, not because of injury. And that was something that's very frustrating, but it can cost you a ton of games. We know that. So you're trying to build off of that and make that better too.
Tom, you know, when you make a pick for a player, it's the scoring, the rebounding. How much do you weigh those intangibles and maybe talking to a previous coach or a former teammate, or just what goes into the non-basketball when you make a pick as well?
All that. I mean, there's so much background that goes into this, and anymore, especially with a one-and-done kid, you're actually watching more of his EYBL, more of his national team stuff, because their presence in an NBA box score, in an NCAA box score, is a little bit different. They're asked to do different things in college than they are on the way up. But you're constantly checking their character, you're constantly checking their work ethic and their love for the game. And we need some more dogs. You hear that a lot. Our players love to say that. And, you know, what does that mean and how are you going to do that? How much of that is a mindset that we don't have, or can we bring that out in players? You know, that's up for debate. But I think this summer we've seen a lot of progress in our players in terms of coming together. The game's slowing down a little bit for the younger guys. And I think we're going to continue to add pieces like that, in my opinion. I think that's what we need to do. A little bit more patience, but certainly pushing guys to understand accountability and what we expect from their position.
Tommy, there's at least 4 players that are going to be in the lottery or projected to be in the lottery that from their freshman to sophomore year have quantum leaps in their game. I mean, significant. Is there kind of a correlation between that? Was it just kids dealing with COVID that bubble year and then coach putting the ball in their hand? Was there something significant about the uptick in their production?
I think it was opportunity. And to your point, a lot of those guys were in the Big Ten, which is really interesting, right? And they all, a couple of them were on our national team this summer that went and played. And, you know, they were actually role players there. A couple of them had big bust-out seasons, to your point, in the Big Ten, a couple other places. But I think if you are patient in college, the first year may not go your way. The second year, you're almost guaranteed to have it go your way because your usage is going to be extremely high. I can't, you know, is this going to be a one-off? Is it how the future is? I don't know. I think we're going to see a lot more avenues for kids to get to the NBA that don't involve going to college. So you have to pay real close attention to what's coming. I don't know if that's going to continue to happen in college. I can't speak to that. We got to go where the players are and where they're coming to the NBA from. You know, and now there's even between the Team Ignite opportunity and the G League, Overtime Elite, you know, Australia's opening up. You're seeing more players drafted from there, and obviously Europe and China has always been options. So they're going to come from everywhere. Is there seasons that they're doing overseas, maybe we're not seeing them? Are those the same as the player that's having the great second year? You know, that's to be seen. It's a great question, but I think hopefully it's not a one-off. Hopefully you see more players stick around, go back to college for another year if they're not ready to come to the NBA. But if you're ready, come. I don't have any qualms whatsoever. If you come at 18, 19 years old, if you're ready to play and you've collected enough information that says you can make it in the NBA, great. But if going back to school, sucking it up, going back for another year, and that helps your draft position, great for you too. You know, but just be accountable for it. I think these guys this year, I salute these kids. We spent a lot of time doing these interviews with these players, and they've been through a lot as everybody has the last 2 years. But you could tell the mental fitness was a really, really big part of most of our interviews, to be honest with you.
You said back in an interview with the Team 980, I think in April, that Jerry West had told you need to don't be afraid to take the big swing. And I feel like the big swing has been a phrase that's been used around here more specifically over the past couple of years or so. How would you define a big swing, and would you categorize any moves that you have made thus far as a big swing?
Yeah, I think you know it when you see it, if that makes sense. That bringing Russell was a pretty big swing, right? That was a pretty big deal for us because he was able to play, came in, did a pretty amazing job helping us get to a playoffs, and the imprint that he'd helped with Bradley, his leadership and things. But certainly that led to a different swing. I wouldn't say it's a big swing as much as a necessary swing to go out and acquire more talent than just one player. We felt we had to do that. I don't mean to throw that word around when I say we're not afraid to jump into deals. Is probably a better way to describe it than big swings. Big swings, hey, franchise player, go out there and get that. Certainly that'd be a huge swing. I don't think those happen every day in the NBA, period. But I think some of the moves that we made, certainly with Porzingis, a talent like that was available. They don't come around very often. He's a very unique player in the NBA, someone that we thought would be fantastic to play with Bradley. So to go out and do that, we had to move off of a guy that we signed the season before and we invested in, and then our top free agent last summer. We would still do that because it takes talent to get talent, and we felt that we netted out a really, I think a very unique talent in the NBA, former All-Star, and hopefully be an All-Star again. To me, that's a big swing. I guess I can't quantify it with the media. I just know internally when you talk in NBA circles, that was a pretty big deal. I think people would recognize it as being that was, you had to do something big. That was a big thing. I don't think anybody saw that coming. But a big swing to me means you're taking a lot of your players off your roster to send to another place to bring in a different kind of talent. And I hate to do the big swings. A lot of times means you gas your whole roster. And when you have to aggregate a lot of players, you hurt your depth. But certainly you always want the best talent. So I'm not looking for a good balance there. If there's something that's available, we're not opposed to trying to get better, whatever way it takes. You don't want to give up your entire roster to get one piece. But if that piece is good enough, then and it's the right time to do it. I don't think you actively seek out every time to take big swings because sooner or later your team has to be consistent and reliable, and continuity has to build.
Has there been a mentality change from where you took over and you were just interim GM to now you come into a new position as well, a new title, and now you're a little more established? Has there been a mentality change as to approaching decisions and with your roster, or have you tried to stay consistent in your approach since you took over and nothing really has changed?
I think you learn as you go through this, certainly to don't be afraid to look at all kinds of different players on your roster. We've moved a lot of players in and out, and certainly that you learn as you go. But you can't find out something if you don't try it. And I don't think we've risked heavily on huge draft capital. I don't think we've done anything to jeopardize the future of the franchise. But sometimes you look at a player and you say, that player with this player, I know this team would love to have those guys. So you have to have a lot of moves strategically to acquire talent that certainly if it's good for your team, great, but also it helps acquire a player that you have your eye on down the road. Trades don't happen overnight often, seldom. But they start at trade deadline. You get some ideas from teams of what they're looking for. Even get through free agency. Maybe it's a carryover to the next trade deadline. But what I learned is you have to have talent to get talent. And more so as the stakes get higher and where we want to go. Before you want to make the playoffs. Well, now I think the playoffs, not that it's a given. We certainly don't take it for granted. But you want to be in that mix. You want to get home court. Then you want to keep building off of that. To get there, you have to have talent. And we're going to continue any which way we can to do that. I think developing homegrown talent is huge. But I also look at the league and, what a Golden State was able to do this year. A lot of that was homegrown talent. But they were banged up for a couple of years too. So they brought in new players. Boston has some examples of guys that were homegrown. So the game for us, we got to just be what the Wizards are. And we have some young players that we developed here. We've had some players that we've acquired through trade. We got free agency coming up, so we're going to continue. To your point, have I changed? I think as you get more experience dealing with teams and GMs, who you can make deals with, who's actively seeking to make their teams better, I think those are the best kind of deals. I don't think you go out every single day saying, hey, we're going to look for the big swing today. But you have to know where those big swings could possibly be, make that decision collectively if that's what's best for our franchise. I think we made a big swing last summer hiring Wes Unseld. Couldn't be happier. I think he's going to be one of the top bright young coaches in our game. The best thing about his first year is when it's over. You know, you start out, you're 10-3, things are going pretty great, but even then at the time we all told each other this is not necessarily going to be sustainable. We won some games that we probably shouldn't have. We went through some tough stuff. Couldn't have predicted COVID. Couldn't have predicted Bradley's injury. I think when Bradley went down, we were probably 2 games under 500. We were still on track to make the playoffs. I think if you took the best player off of any team in the NBA, particularly in the playoff teams, they probably wouldn't have made they wouldn't have maybe had the same impact in the playoffs if they made the playoffs at all. So we recognize that our team's better with Bradley on there. But I think where this season for us, we're the benefit of having a lot of young guys now that have played together enough, adding some more talent, someone like KP who can handle the scoring load with Bradley. I'm anxious to get to that point. I'm anxious to see the season start.
You mentioned how more players are coming to the G League. How do you evaluate them compared to the competition, maybe compared to college? And how has that changed the scouting process?
That's a great question because there's, this is the second iteration of Team Ignite. The first one played in a bubble, right? They scrimmaged in gyms around Northern California against pickup teams for a long time, then they got to go to a bubble. Still in that, we saw something in Isaiah Todd that we felt, hey, that's worth a roll on the dice. The second iteration of those teams, I think there's been more games certainly played, and with the go-go, we get a chance to evaluate every team that comes through here. But I see more and more players willing to come to the NBA via the G League because they see the minutes that they're able to play. Versus before the G League was an option, you draft a kid and he's just sitting behind the bench in street clothes. Now they have that opportunity to get better. I think you see a lot quicker development because of that. I'm really excited. Our setup with the Capital City Go-Go is very, very unique, one of the best in the G League, and that we're all in the same building. We're all at the practices. West comes to their practices. They're working out with us. There's a lot more proximity, certainly, but a lot more familiarity. And I think, you want to always keep that hunger. G League players are not NBA players. They're not there yet, but they're seeing every day what could be available to them. I think that gives them a little bit more hunger every day, a little bit more edge to work for. And we're seeing the progress. You saw some really good young G League players for the Go-Go last year. They'll be on our summer league roster and have chances to get 2 ways, chances to make the roster. That's all available.
If you guys draft another wing again, like kind of that tweener 3-4 spot, are you comfortable with the log jam? That would great. Would you look to kind of move other guys out? Like how do you?
The draft isn't here today, certainly, but you take the best talent available. And to me, wings, you can say logjam, but what's the most coveted position in the NBA right now? So why not keep looking and see if there's something that you can improve upon? And certainly these are players. They're not just by it. I don't try to say this is the only thing that they can do. There's a little bit more versatility out there. I think we can play small. Now we're getting bigger and more length. We can play a little bit different, unique-wise as well. But, the log jams are log jams. They take care of themselves. The best thing about talent is talent's going to play.
And how do you kind of view your big situation with Thomas? I know you said Thomas Bryant, you'd like him back or kind of around there. But
He's a free agent. We'll look at all those people on June 30th. Certainly we look at what's the best thing for the Wizards, what's the best thing. Thomas is somebody I'm very endeared to. He's a fantastic kid, went through an awful lot. Didn't get a chance to play basically because of injury, and he came back and trying to get stuff a whole season into less than 30 games. I think he's very capable. We've seen what he can do in the past. I'd love to see that again, but free agency's free agency. There's no predicting where that's all going to go.
and then just how do you kind of view that position as a whole? Because
I think that's ideal to have those two. You know, I would take that and build on that. I think you're going to always need a third center, but more so somebody that's versatile enough to play a couple positions. But we have guys who can play up. I think Kuz can play the 5 a little bit. I think Rui's been able to play the 4 and the 3. Kuz can play 4, 5. He can guard threes. You know, it's really in the NBA. It's all about who you can guard. If you have some guys out there that can guard length, and go for it. You know, the big guy up the road in Philly. You know, nobody guards him. So we're not trying to say you got to go guard Embiid one-on-one. You know, but there's guys that I think we certainly take that position as something we feel good about having. KP and Daniel certainly. We think they can play together a little bit, so.
How much harder is it to facilitate a trade after the draft is done?
You make a trade when you make a trade. There's no easy or hard that comes with it. It's just maintaining. You know, I think a lot of times, to your point, after the draft, people really have a good idea of what they truly have, right? Because before the draft, you don't know if you're going to get this certain player or whatever comes up. So after the draft, really it's after that 3rd or 4th day of free agency that a lot of deals can come together, because you didn't maybe get what you wanted in free agency, right? And you didn't get what you wanted in the draft. So now things shift and you look at players a little bit different. But I think you make a deal when it's best for your team. If it's before the draft night, after free agency starts, you know, those kind of come together. There's no predictability on when the best day is, I promise.
One more question. There's a last question.
I think before the draft, I heard you do an interview. You said you're like 15 to 10 guys at that 10 spot. Now it sounds like you're down to 5. How will those 5 be able to just separate themselves?
We think they'll be there, for one thing, for sure. But I think they kind of come out with the characteristics. An original list, when I was looking at, a couple guys went back to college. You know, they didn't put their name in the draft. So that's something you deal with too. But I don't think there's been one thing that definitely you say, wow, we didn't know that about this player. These are kind of who we thought they were. And put them in order in terms of, for us, like, who do we really think can maybe be a rotation player sooner than later. But, you know, that's the exciting part about the draft. You just kind of wait and see who's there when your number's called, and we'll take it from there. But I think we're pretty excited about those players that I spoke of. Well, I didn't tell you guys who they were, but with our staff, we're meeting right now and going over names as, hey, this is good. This is a good group to pick from. So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you, Tom.
Welcome back to Cap One. You can see our courts are getting redone. That's why we're all over here. So when you get back to the practice facility, it's going to look a little bit neat. Have a good one.
Thank you.